The afternoon sun beat down on Quartz Hill, Arizona Territory, on that sweltering August day in 1882. When Beatrice Owens hurried down Main Street with her arms full of basket and trouble, she had been running late all morning, first at the general store where Mrs. Henderson had kept her talking about the upcoming church social, then at the butcher shop, where Mr. Daniels had insisted on wrapping her order twice because the first paper had torn. Now she was practically running, her worn boots kicking up dust, her basket laden with eggs, a jar of honey, fresh bread, vegetables, and the precious bottle of medicine Dr. Morrison had finally received for her ailing father. The weight of it all pulled at her arms, and she could feel the handles starting to slip in her sweating palms. Beatrice tried to adjust her grip without slowing down, knowing her father would be wondering where she had gotten to, knowing he would try to get out of bed to check on things around their small ranch despite his illness. That worry made her careless. Her boot caught on a raised plank in the boardwalk where it transitioned to the dirt street, and suddenly she was stumbling forward, arms windmilling, the basket flying from her hands. The crash seemed to echo through the entire town. Eggs shattered across the dusty street, their golden yolks mixing with the Arizona dirt. The jar of honey cracked, thick amber liquid oozing out like blood. Vegetables rolled in every direction. The bread landed in a puddle from yesterday's rare rain, and worst of all, the medicine bottle bounced twice before coming to rest precariously against a wagon wheel. Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes as she dropped to her knees, her pale blue dress already covered in dust. That medicine had cost nearly all the money they had left, and the eggs were supposed to be for trading with the Johnsons for milk, since their last cow had died in the spring. The honey had been a rare treat she had saved for weeks to afford, thinking it might tempt her father's failing appetite. "No, no, no," she whispered, reaching for the medicine bottle first, her hands shaking. At 22 years old, she had been taking care of her father and their struggling ranch for 4 years since her mother had passed, and she had faced plenty of hardships. But lately, everything seemed to be falling apart faster than she could hold it together. "Madam, hold on now." The voice was deep and gentle, and Beatrice looked up to see a tall cowboy crouching beside her, his tanned hand closing carefully around the medicine bottle before she could reach it. He lifted it slowly, checking it for damage, then smiled with evident relief. "Looks like this one survived the fall," he said, handing it to her carefully. "That's good fortune, at least." Beatrice took the bottle with trembling hands, clutching it to her chest as she finally got a good look at the stranger. He was tall, probably in his mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and dark brown hair that curled slightly beneath his dusty hat. His eyes were a striking light brown, almost amber, and they held genuine concern as they met hers. He wore typical cowboy attire, worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows showing strong forearms, a vest, and a red bandana around his neck. Everything about him spoke of a man who worked hard for his living. "I am so sorry," she stammered, not even sure what she was apologizing for. "I was not watching where I was going." "No need to apologize," he said, already moving to gather the vegetables that had rolled away. "Accidents happen to everyone. Let me help you with this." "You do not have to," Beatrice protested, but he was already jogging after a potato that had somehow rolled nearly 10 feet away. "I insist," he called back. "Besides, my mother would have my hide if she heard I left a lady to clean up a mess in the street by herself." He worked quickly and efficiently, gathering the scattered vegetables and placing them back in her basket, which had survived the fall mostly intact except for one broken handle. The bread was ruined, soaked through, and he set it aside with an apologetic glance. The eggs were a complete loss, nothing but broken shells and yolk in the dirt. The honey jar had cracked but not shattered completely, and he picked it up carefully, wrapping it in his own bandana to keep it from leaking further. "I am afraid the eggs did not make it," he said, brushing off a carrot before adding it to the basket. "And this bread saw its last day." "That is my own fault for being careless," Beatrice said, her voice tight as she tried not to cry. She was being foolish, she told herself. They were just eggs and bread. But they were not just eggs and bread, and they both knew it. The cowboy studied her face for a moment, and something in his expression softened even further. "Bad day?" he asked quietly. Beatrice let out a shaky laugh. "Bad month. Bad year, if I am being honest." He nodded as if he understood completely. "Those happen. More often than we would like." He gathered the last few items and stood, offering her his hand. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet with easy strength. Up close, she realized he was even taller than she had thought, and the kindness in his eyes made her throat tight. "Thank you for your help, mister." She trailed off, realizing she did not know his name, Lawson Edwards, but most folks just call me Law. He tipped his hat to her. "And you would be Beatrice Owens. My father and I have a ranch about 2 miles west of town." "The Owens place," Law said, recognition flickering across his face. "I have heard of it. Good land out there." "It used to be," Beatrice said, then caught herself. She should not be sharing her troubles with a complete stranger, no matter how kind his eyes were. "I should be getting home. Thank you again for your help, Mr. Edwards." "Law," he corrected gently. He picked up her basket, now significantly lighter than it had been. "And I will walk you home." "That is not necessary," Beatrice protested. "You must have your own business to attend to." "Nothing that cannot wait," Law said firmly. "Besides, this basket has a broken handle. You will never make it 2 miles carrying it like that. And—" He hesitated, then continued. "To be honest, Miss Owens, you look like you could use a friend right about now." His words, spoken with such simple honesty, nearly undid her completely. Beatrice blinked rapidly, willing herself not to cry in the middle of Main Street in front of this stranger who was being kinder to her than anyone had been in a long time. "I would appreciate the company," she admitted quietly, "if you are certain you do not mind." "I would not have offered if I minded," Law assured her. He shifted the basket to a more comfortable position. "Lead the way, Miss Owens." They started walking, leaving the bustle of Quartz Hill behind them. The town was small but growing, fueled by the nearby mining operations and the railroad that had come through 3 years earlier. Beatrice usually loved the walk to and from town, enjoyed the way the landscape opened up into rolling hills dotted with saguaro cacti and scrubby brush. Today, though, she had been too worried to notice the beauty around her. "Have you been in Quartz Hill long?" she asked after they had walked in silence for a few minutes. The quiet had been comfortable, but she found herself curious about this man who had come to her aid. "About 3 weeks," Law replied. "I have been working at the Double R Ranch helping with their cattle drive preparation. Before that, I was up in New Mexico territory." "That is quite a ways to travel." "I like to move around," Law said, but there was something in his voice that suggested there was more to the story. "See different places, meet different people. The West is still wild enough that a man can find work just about anywhere if he is willing to do it." "That must be an interesting life," Beatrice said, trying to imagine what it would be like to just pick up and move whenever the mood struck. She had lived in or near Quartz Hill her entire life. "It has its moments," Law agreed, "though it can get lonely sometimes. Hard to put down roots when you are always moving on." They fell silent again as the path grew steeper. The Owens Ranch sat in a small valley between 2 hills, protected from the worst of the wind but still open enough to catch the evening breezes. As they crested the last rise, Beatrice could see the house below. A small adobe structure with a sagging porch and a barn that needed repairs she could not afford. The fence around the small corral was held together more by prayer than nails, and the vegetable garden she had been trying to maintain looked sad and scraggly in the harsh Arizona sun. She saw Law take it all in, and shame heated her cheeks. The ranch that had once been her father's pride had fallen into disrepair, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Your father is ill, you said?" Law asked, his voice carefully neutral. Beatrice had not said exactly, but she supposed it was obvious from the medicine bottle she still clutched in one hand. "Yes, he has been sick for about 6 months now. Dr. Morrison says it is his lungs. The dust out here, years of it, has just worn them down." She swallowed hard. "He is not getting better." "I am sorry," Law said, and he sounded like he meant it. "That must be hard on you both." "He hates being laid up," Beatrice said, grateful to talk about it to someone who was not giving her pitying looks or offering prayers that never seemed to help. "He keeps trying to work, which makes everything worse. I have been trying to keep the ranch going, but I am just one person and there is so much to do." "Have you thought about hiring help?" Beatrice laughed, the sound bitter even to her own ears. "With what money?" "Everything we had has gone to doctor bills and medicine. We have been selling off the cattle one by one just to keep food on the table. I do not even know if we will make it through the winter." She stopped abruptly, horrified at herself. "I apologize. You did not ask to hear all of that." "You do not need to apologize," Law said firmly. "Sometimes it helps to say things out loud, even to a stranger. Especially to a stranger, maybe, since I have got no stake in judging you for it." They had reached the house now, and Beatrice could see her father's profile through the window, sitting up in bed. He would scold her for being late, for worrying him, but his anger always came from love, she knew. "Thank you for walking me home," she said, taking the basket from Law. Their fingers brushed and she felt a strange flutter in her stomach. "And for helping me gather everything. I am grateful." "It was my pleasure, Miss Owens." Law tipped his hat to her, but he did not immediately turn to leave. He looked at the ranch again, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I have got tomorrow off from the Double R. If you would not mind, I could come by and help with some of the repairs I am seeing. That fence is not going to last another month the way it is, and your barn roof has some holes that need patching before the autumn rains come." Beatrice stared at him. "I could not ask you to do that. I already told you I cannot afford to pay anyone." "I am not asking for pay," Law said simply. "I am offering to help a neighbor. That is what folks do out here, is it not? Help each other out. But you do not even know me." "I know you are working yourself to the bone trying to take care of your father and keep a ranch running by yourself," Law said. "I know you cared more about that medicine bottle than anything else in your basket, which means you are a good daughter. And I know you could use a hand." "That is enough for me." Beatrice felt tears threatening again, but this time they were from gratitude rather than despair. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Law was quiet for a moment, looking out at the horizon. "A few years back I was in a bad way. Got thrown from a horse during a stampede and broke my leg in 3 places. I was out in the middle of nowhere, and if a family of homesteaders had not taken me in and nursed me back to health, I would have died. They did not know me, did not owe me anything, but they helped anyway. The mother of that family told me that kindness is never wasted, and that someday I would have the chance to pass it along to someone else who needed it." He looked back at her, his amber eyes warm. "I reckon today is that day." "I do not know what to say," Beatrice whispered. "Say I can come by tomorrow and fix that fence," Law suggested with a gentle smile. Yes, Beatrice said. Yes, please, thank you, Law nodded, satisfied. I will be here around dawn before it gets too hot. You have tools, some, Beatrice admitted. They are not in the best shape. I will bring what I need, Law assured her. You just make sure you and your father get some rest tonight. Tomorrow is a new day. He tipped his hat one more time and turned to go, his long stride eating up the distance back toward town. Beatrice watched him until he disappeared over the rise, then looked down at her basket with its meager contents. She had lost the eggs and the bread and the honey, but somehow she felt lighter than she had in months. When she entered the house, her father was indeed waiting, his weathered face creased with worry. Beatrice, where have you been? I was getting concerned. I am sorry, Papa, she said, setting the basket down and going to his bedside. I had a mishap in town, but someone helped me. And I have your medicine. She showed him the bottle, and relief washed over his face. His coughing had been worse lately, keeping both of them awake at night. Thank goodness. Did it cost much? We can manage, Beatrice lied, not wanting to worry him further. Now, let me get you a dose of this, and then I will fix supper. As she measured out the medicine and helped her father take it, she told him about Lawson Edwards and his offer to help with the repairs. Her father listened with interest, his blue eyes, so like her own, studying her face. This Cowboy, he said when she finished. He seems like a good man. He was very kind, Beatrice agreed, busying herself with adjusting his pillows. You said he has tomorrow off. He could have spent it resting or in the saloon with the other ranch hands. Instead, he is coming here to help strangers. I know, Papa, it is very generous of him. Her father was quiet for a moment, then reached out to take her hand. Beatrice, you are a good daughter, better than I deserve. But you are also a young woman, and you should be thinking about your own life, your own future, not spending all your time taking care of an old man. You are not old, and you are my father. Where else would I be? You should be courting, going to church socials, wearing pretty dresses instead of work clothes, her father said, his voice rough with emotion and illness. Your mother and I, we never wanted this life for you. I have the life I have, Beatrice said firmly, squeezing his hand. And I would not trade it. Now, no more talk like that. You are going to get better, and we are going to get through this. Her father smiled, but it was sad. They both knew he was not going to get better. The medicine might ease his symptoms, but Dr. Morrison had been clear. The damage to his lungs was permanent and progressive. It was only a matter of time. But time was all they had, so Beatrice chose to make the most of it. She prepared a simple supper of beans and the vegetables she had managed to salvage, along with some salt pork from their dwindling stores. They ate together, her father in his bed and Beatrice in the chair beside him, talking about small things, good memories, avoiding the weight of reality that pressed down on them both. That night, Beatrice lay in her own narrow bed in the small room that had been hers since childhood, listening to her father's labored breathing through the thin wall. She thought about Lawson Edwards, about his kind amber eyes and strong hands carefully gathering her scattered belongings. She thought about his offer to help, freely given with no expectation of payment or reward. She thought about the way her heart had fluttered when their fingers touched. That last thought made her restless. She had no business thinking such things about a man she had just met, a drifter who would probably move on in a few weeks or months. She needed to focus on her father, on keeping the ranch afloat, on surviving. Romance was a luxury she could not afford. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, it was Law's smile she saw in her dreams. True to his word, Law arrived just as the sun was painting the eastern sky pink and gold. Beatrice, who had been up for an hour already feeding the few chickens they still had and checking on their 2 remaining horses, saw him coming down the path with a pack of tools over his shoulder. He had changed into older clothes, clearly prepared for hard work, and he waved when he saw her watching. "Morning, Miss Owens," he called out cheerfully. "I hope I am not too early." "Not at all," Beatrice said, wiping her hands on her apron. "I have been up for a while. I have coffee on if you would like some before you start." "That sounds perfect," Law said, following her into the house. The inside of the Owens home was as modest as the outside, but it was clean and clearly cared for. The furniture was old but well maintained, and there were touches of femininity that spoke of a woman's hand. Curtains at the windows, a vase with wildflowers on the table, a quilt draped over the back of the rocking chair. Law could see into the bedroom where Beatrice's father lay, and the older man was watching him with keen interest. "Papa, this is Lawson Edwards," Beatrice said, pouring coffee into 2 tin cups. "Law, this is my father, Benjamin Owens." "Mr. Owens," Law said, stepping to the bedroom doorway. "It is good to meet you, sir." "And you, young man," Benjamin said, his voice raspy but strong. "My daughter tells me you are planning to help with some repairs around here. If that is all right with you, sir," Law said. "I have got the day free, and I noticed yesterday that there are a few things that need attention." Benjamin studied him for a long moment, and Law had the feeling he was being measured in ways that had nothing to do with his carpentry skills. Finally, the older man nodded. "I appreciate it," he said simply. "There is a lot my girl has been trying to manage on her own, too much for one person." "I am happy to help," Law assured him. Beatrice brought Law his coffee, and they went back outside where the day was already starting to heat up. Law surveyed the property in the morning light, making mental notes of what needed the most urgent attention. "I will start with the fence," he decided. "Those posts need to be reset, and several of the rails are rotted through. Then I will take a look at the barn roof." "You have any spare wood around?" "There is some in the barn," Beatrice said. "Not much, but you can use what we have." "That will be a start," Law said. He set down his coffee and picked up a shovel from his tool pack. "You have got your own work to do, I am sure. Do not let me keep you from it." "Are you certain you do not need help?" Beatrice asked, feeling guilty about leaving him to work alone. "I am certain you have got enough to do without adding this to it," Law said kindly. "Besides, I work better with my own rhythm. But I would not say no to some more coffee in a couple of hours if you have got it to spare." Beatrice nodded and headed off to tend to her own chores, though she found her attention drifting frequently to where Law was working on the fence. He moved with practiced efficiency, digging out the old posts, setting new ones, testing each rail for soundness and replacing those that had rotted. He worked steadily despite the growing heat, pausing occasionally to wipe sweat from his brow or take a drink from the canteen he had brought with him. She brought him fresh coffee mid-morning as promised, along with some of the biscuits she had made for breakfast. Law accepted both gratefully, sitting on an overturned bucket in the shade of a scraggly mesquite tree. "You do good work," Beatrice observed, looking at the section of fence he had already repaired. It was straight and sturdy, better than it had looked in years. "My father was a carpenter back in Missouri," Law explained. "He made sure all his sons knew how to work with wood and tools. Said a man who could build things would never go hungry. Was he right?" "Mostly," Law said with a slight smile, "though I have had a few lean times here and there." He took a bite of biscuit and made an appreciative sound. "These are excellent. Thank you," Beatrice said, pleased. "They are my mother's recipe. She taught you well." They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the distant call of a hawk and the breeze rustling through the dry grass. It was peaceful, and Beatrice realized with a start that she felt more relaxed than she had in months. "Can I ask you something?" Law said suddenly. "Of course." "Why do you stay?" he asked, his tone curious rather than judgmental. "You could sell this place, move to town, find work as a seamstress or a teacher or any number of things. It would be easier than trying to run a ranch by yourself." Beatrice had asked herself the same question more times than she could count. "This is my home," she said simply. "My parents built this ranch from nothing, poured their whole lives into it. My mother is buried just over that rise." She gestured to the low hill west of the house. "I cannot just abandon all of that. And my father, he loves this place. Even sick as he is, he loves looking out the window and seeing the land he worked so hard for. I cannot take that away from him in whatever time he has left." Law nodded slowly. "That makes sense. Family and land, those are the things worth fighting for." "What about you?" Beatrice asked. "You said you like to move around, but do you ever think about settling somewhere, having your own place?" "Sometimes," Law admitted. "But I've never found the right spot, I guess. Or maybe the right reason to stop moving." He stood, brushing crumbs from his pants. "I should get back to work. That fence is not going to fix itself." He worked through the afternoon, stopping only briefly for the lunch Beatrice brought him. By the time the sun was starting to sink toward the western horizon, he had repaired the entire corral fence and started on the barn roof. Beatrice watched him from the window as she prepared supper, marveling at his tireless energy and skill. When she called him in to eat as the evening cooled, Law protested that he should not impose, but Benjamin's voice came from the bedroom, insisting that he stay. "You have worked all day in the heat," the older man said. "The least we can do is feed you a decent meal." The supper was simple but hearty: fried potatoes, beans, cornbread, and some of the precious salt pork. Law ate with genuine appreciation, complimenting Beatrice's cooking until she blushed. He told them stories of his travels, tales of cattle drives and cowboys, of towns booming and busting with the mining rushes, of characters he had met along the way. He had a gift for storytelling, making them laugh with his descriptions and keeping them enthralled with his adventures. For a few hours, the small house felt warm and alive in a way it had not since before Beatrice's mother died. Benjamin looked more animated than he had in weeks, and Beatrice found herself smiling until her cheeks hurt. When it was time for Law to go, he gathered his tools and thanked them for the meal. "I will come back day after tomorrow if that is all right," he said. "I have got to work tomorrow, but I would like to finish that roof and maybe take a look at your well. The mechanism looked a little rusted." "You have already done so much," Beatrice protested. "We cannot ask you to keep giving up your free time." "You are not asking," Law pointed out. "I am offering. There is a difference." After he left, Benjamin looked at his daughter with a knowing expression. "That is a good man," he said. "Yes," Beatrice agreed softly. "He is. And handsome too, I noticed." "Papa," Beatrice felt her face heat. Her father laughed, which turned into coughing, but he waved away her concern. "I may be sick, but I am not blind. I saw the way you looked at him. And the way he looked at you, for that matter." "You are imagining things," Beatrice said firmly, but her heart was beating faster. "Maybe," Benjamin said, settling back into his pillows. "Or maybe you are just scared to let yourself hope for something good." That night, Beatrice lay awake again, her father's words echoing in her mind. Was she scared to hope? She had been focused for so long on just surviving, just getting through each day, that she had stopped thinking about things like happiness or love or a future beyond the next crisis. Law Edwards had appeared in her life like something out of a dream, kind and strong and willing to help without asking for anything in return. It seemed too good to be true, which meant it probably was. Men like him did not just settle down with struggling ranch women who had nothing to offer but hard work and harder times. But oh, she thought, as sleep finally claimed her, it would be nice if they did. Law returned 2 days later as promised, and then again the following week, and the week after that. A pattern developed. He would come on his days off, work on whatever needed fixing around the ranch, and stay for supper. Sometimes he came in the evening after work and just sat on the porch, talking with Beatrice and Benjamin about everything and nothing. The ranch slowly began to transform under his care. The fence was solid again, the barn roof no longer leaked, the well worked smoothly. He fixed the sagging porch, replaced broken windows, and even helped Beatrice repair the chicken coop so it would be more secure against predators. But more than the physical repairs, something else was being mended too. Beatrice found herself looking forward to Law's visits with an eagerness that both thrilled and frightened her. She started taking more care with her appearance on the days he was due to arrive, putting on her better dress, taking the time to braid her blonde hair neatly instead of just tying it back in a hasty knot. They talked while they worked, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Law told her about his family back in Missouri, about the brothers and sisters he had left behind when he struck out west. He talked about the things he had seen, the good and the bad, the moments of beauty and moments of terror that came with life on the frontier. Beatrice told him about her childhood, about her mother who had been strong and loving, about the good years when the ranch had prospered. She shared her worries about her father, her fears about the future, her secret dreams of someday making the ranch thrive again. "You could do it," Law said one evening as they sat on the newly repaired porch watching the sunset. Benjamin was sleeping, and the world seemed very quiet and peaceful. "Make the ranch thrive again, I mean. You have got the determination and the brains for it. You just need some help and a bit of luck." "Luck has not exactly been on my side lately," Beatrice said wryly. "Luck changes," Law said. He was sitting close to her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cooling evening air. "Just when you think it is all gone, it can come back again." "Is that your experience?" Beatrice asked, turning to look at him. "It is now," Law said softly, and his amber eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. They sat there, the moment stretching between them, full of possibility and unspoken feelings. Beatrice's heart pounded so hard she was sure Law must be able to hear it. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Law reached over and took her hand. His palm was calloused from hard work, warm and strong, and his fingers curled gently around hers. Beatrice looked down at their joined hands, then back up at his face. What she saw there made her pulse race. Affection, desire, hope, and something deeper, something that looked like it might be the beginnings of love. "Beatrice," he started, then stopped, seeming unsure of himself for the first time since she had met him. "I know I have got no right to say this, no right to even think it, but I need you to know that these past weeks, coming here, getting to know you and your father, it has meant more to me than just about anything has in a long time." "It has meant a great deal to me too," Beatrice whispered. "I am just a cowboy," Law continued, his thumb stroking across the back of her hand in a way that sent shivers up her arm. "I do not have much to offer, but I am a hard worker and I am honest, and I would do right by you if you would let me." Beatrice's eyes widened as she realized what he was trying to say. "Law, I know it is too soon," he rushed on. "I know we have only known each other a short time, and I know you have got your father to think about and the ranch, and 100 other things more important than some drifter who helped you pick up a spilled basket. But Beatrice, I think I am falling in love with you, and I needed you to know that before I lost my nerve." For a moment, Beatrice could not breathe, could not think, could only feel the wild racing of her heart and the warmth of Law's hand in hers. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, the first truly unguarded, joyful smile she had worn in longer than she could remember. "You are not just some drifter," she said. "You are the man who has been helping me hold my world together when I thought it was all going to fall apart. You are the man who has been kind to my father and patient with me and generous with your time and your skills. And Law, I think I am falling in love with you too." The smile that broke across Law's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, his eyes never leaving hers. "Can I court you proper, then? Come calling official-like with your father's permission and all the respect you deserve." "I think I would like that very much," Beatrice said, her voice shaky with happiness. "Then I will talk to your father tomorrow," Law declared. "Do this right." "He likes you," Beatrice assured him. "He has been not so subtly hinting that I should encourage your attention for weeks now." Law laughed, the sound warm and rich in the gathering darkness. "Has he now? Well, that makes me feel better about my chances." They sat together on the porch until the stars came out, talking and planning and dreaming about possibilities that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. When Law finally left, he squeezed her hand one more time and promised to return the next day. Beatrice floated through the house in a daze of happiness, checking on her father before going to her own room. Benjamin was awake, watching her with knowing eyes. "Law is going to ask your permission to court me," she told him, unable to keep the joy from her voice. "About time," Benjamin said, smiling. "I was beginning to think you two would never figure out what was plain as day to everyone else." "You do not mind?" Beatrice asked, sudden worry tempering her happiness. "If we were to, if he and I were to eventually, you would not feel like I was abandoning you." "Mind?" Benjamin shook his head firmly despite the effort it cost him. "Beatrice, honey, the only thing that could make me happier than seeing you with a good man who loves you would be knowing you were settled and cared for before I go. Law Edwards is the answer to prayers I did not even know how to say." Tears filled Beatrice's eyes, but they were good tears this time. "I love you, Papa." "I love you too, sweetheart. Now get some rest. You have got a big day tomorrow." Law arrived the next afternoon straight from his work at the Double R, still dusty from the range but with his hat in his hand and his expression respectfully serious. Beatrice watched from the kitchen window as he approached the house, her stomach fluttering with nerves and excitement. "Mr. Owens," Law said, standing in the doorway to Benjamin's room. "I would like to speak with you, sir, if you are feeling up to it." "Come in, son," Benjamin said, gesturing to the chair beside his bed. "I think I know what this is about." Beatrice busied herself in the kitchen, trying to give them privacy while simultaneously straining to hear every word. She heard the low rumble of Law's voice, steady and earnest, then her father's response, warm with approval. When Law emerged 15 minutes later, he was smiling. "He said yes," Law told Beatrice, taking both her hands in his. "He gave me his blessing to court you proper." Beatrice felt like she might float away with happiness. "I am so glad." "There is more," Law said, his expression turning more serious. "I talked to Mr. Richardson at the Double R, and he has offered me a permanent position as one of his top hands. The pay is better, and it comes with a small house on the property. But I told him I could not take it unless it was all right with you and your father, because I want to keep helping here as much as I can. The house is only about 30 minutes' ride from here, so I could come by every evening after work if you wanted." "You would do that?" Beatrice asked, amazed. "Keep working at the Double R all day and then come here?" "For you," Law said simply. "Yes, and because I think between the two of us we could really make something of this ranch. Not right away, not while your father needs you close, but eventually. I have been thinking about it a lot, and I have got some ideas." "Tell me," Beatrice said, leading him to the kitchen table and sitting down across from him. Law's eyes lit up as he began to share his vision. "You have got good grazing land here, good water from that well. With some investment and hard work, you could build up a decent herd again. Not huge, but enough to make a living. And I was thinking about horses too. There is always a market for good horses, and you have got the space to do it right. It would take time and it would not be easy, but I think we could do it together." "We," Beatrice repeated, loving the sound of the word. "We," Law confirmed, reaching across the table to take her hand again. It was becoming a habit, that touch, and Beatrice found she never wanted him to stop. "If you will have me, Beatrice, if you will let me be part of your life, part of your dreams." "I cannot imagine anything I would want more," Beatrice said honestly. Over the next several months, Law became a fixture at the Owens ranch. He took the position at the Double R and moved into the small house that came with it, but true to his word, he came to the Owens place every evening. They would work together until dark, maintaining what they had and slowly making improvements where they could. On Sundays, Law would arrive early and stay all day, and they would sit together on the porch or go for walks around the property, always within earshot of the house in case Benjamin needed them. Benjamin's health continued to decline, but the older man seemed at peace with it now. He took joy in watching Beatrice and Law together, in seeing his daughter laugh and smile again. Law treated him with respect and affection, often sitting with him in the evenings to play checkers or just talk about ranching and life. "You take care of her," Benjamin told Law one night when Beatrice had gone to check on the horses. His voice was weak, and they both knew his time was growing short. "She is strong, my girl, but she has been carrying too much alone for too long. You make sure she knows she does not have to do that anymore." "I will, sir," Law promised. "I will spend every day of my life making sure she knows she is loved and supported." "That is all a father could ask," Benjamin said, reaching out to clasp Law's hand with what strength he had left. "You are a good man, Lawson Edwards. I am grateful my daughter found you." "I think she would say I found her," Law said with a slight smile. "Maybe you found each other," Benjamin suggested. "That is how the best matches work." 2 weeks later, on a cool November morning, Benjamin Owens passed away peacefully in his sleep. Beatrice found him when she went to bring him his breakfast, and the grief that crashed over her was overwhelming despite knowing it was coming. Law held her while she cried, his strong arms the only thing keeping her upright as the reality of her loss sank in. They buried Benjamin on the hill next to his wife, with half of Quartz Hill turning out for the funeral. Beatrice had not realized how many people had known and respected her father until they all gathered to say goodbye. Law stood beside her throughout it all, a steady, comforting presence. In the weeks that followed, Law was worried about Beatrice. She went through the motions of daily life, caring for the animals and maintaining the house, but there was a hollowness to her that scared him. He understood grief, had lost people himself, but watching the woman he loved hurt so badly and being unable to fix it was agony. "Talk to me," he said one evening when he found her sitting on the porch staring at nothing. "Please, Beatrice, let me help." "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "I knew it was coming. I thought I was prepared, but Law, the house is so quiet now, so empty. And I keep thinking about all the things I should have said, should have done." "You were a wonderful daughter," Law said firmly, sitting beside her and pulling her close. "Your father knew how much you loved him. He died knowing you were going to be all right, that you had someone to take care of you. That gave him peace." "I miss him," Beatrice whispered. "I know, and you will keep missing him. That does not go away, but it will get easier to bear, I promise." Law pressed a kiss to her temple. "And you do not have to bear it alone." Slowly, gradually, the acute pain of grief began to soften into something more manageable. Beatrice found herself able to smile again, to make plans for the future. She and Law spent Christmas together, just the two of them in the small ranch house, and it was both sad and sweet. As winter turned to spring, Law approached Beatrice one evening with a serious expression. "I need to ask you something," he said. "What is it?" Beatrice asked, looking up from the mending she was doing. "Marry me," Law said simply. "I know it has not been very long since your father passed, and if you want to wait, we can wait. But Beatrice, I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. I want to spend my life with you, building a future together, making this ranch everything it can be. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to have children with you someday if you want that too. I want everything, all of it, with you." Beatrice set down her mending with shaking hands. "Law, I know I am still just a cowboy," Law continued, dropping to one knee in front of her chair. "I do not have much to offer except hard work and a heart full of love, but if that is enough, if I am enough, then please say yes." "You are more than enough," Beatrice said, tears streaming down her face as she cupped his face in her hands. "You are everything. Yes, Law. Yes, I will marry you." Law surged up to kiss her, their first real kiss, and it was sweet and tender and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing and crying at the same time. "When?" Law asked. "When can we get married?" "Soon," Beatrice said. "As soon as we can arrange it. I do not want to wait." "Neither do I," Law agreed. He pulled a small ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small garnet stone. "This was my grandmother's," he explained. "It is not much, but—" "It is perfect," Beatrice breathed as he slipped it onto her finger. "Everything about this is perfect." They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Quartz Hill, with the preacher's wife and the owner of the Double R Ranch standing as witnesses. Beatrice wore a simple blue dress she had made herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Law wore his best clothes, and the look in his eyes when he saw her walking down the aisle made Beatrice feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "I, Lawson, take you, Beatrice, to be my wedded wife," Law said, his voice strong and sure as he held both her hands in his. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. I, Beatrice, take you, Lawson, to be my wedded husband," Beatrice repeated, her voice wavering with emotion. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Law kissed her with such tenderness and joy that Beatrice felt her heart might burst. They walked out of the church together into the bright Arizona sunshine, ready to start their new life as partners in every sense of the word. Law moved into the ranch house that very day, and it was strange and wonderful to have him there all the time instead of just for visits. He filled the space with his presence, his laughter, his love, chasing away the loneliness that had haunted the place since Benjamin's death. They worked the ranch together, waking before dawn and working until dark. It was hard labor, but with two of them sharing the load, it felt manageable in a way it never had when Beatrice was alone. Law proved to be as good as his word, helping her build up the herd and start a small horse breeding operation. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. Money was tight, and there were times when they had to make difficult choices about what to prioritize. A late spring freeze killed half of Beatrice's vegetable garden. One of their best horses went lame and had to be put down. But through it all, they had each other, and that made everything bearable. "I do not know how I ever managed before you," Beatrice said one night as they lay in bed, exhausted from a long day of fence mending. "You managed because you are strong and capable," Law said, pulling her close against his side. "But I am glad you do not have to do it alone anymore." "Me too," Beatrice murmured, already drifting toward sleep. By their second anniversary, the ranch was beginning to show real signs of recovery. They had built the cattle herd up to 30 head, and Beatrice's horse breeding program was gaining a reputation for quality. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were making a steady living, and the future looked brighter than it had in years. "I have something to tell you," Beatrice said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. It was early autumn and the heat of summer was finally beginning to break. "What is it?" Law asked, immediately attentive to the nervous excitement in her voice. "I am pregnant," Beatrice said, turning to watch his face. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Law just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then his face broke into the biggest smile Beatrice had ever seen, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to town. He scooped her up carefully, spinning her around once before setting her down gently as if she were made of glass. "A baby," he breathed, his hands coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Beatrice, this is the best news I have ever heard. You are happy then?" Beatrice asked, even though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy," Law laughed. "I am over the moon. I am the luckiest man in the Arizona Territory, in the whole West, in the whole world." He kissed her then, tender and sweet, and Beatrice felt complete in a way she had not even known she was incomplete. This man, this life they were building together, this baby growing inside her, it was everything she had ever wanted and more than she had ever dared to hope for. Law became even more attentive than usual as Beatrice's pregnancy progressed. He insisted on doing the heavier chores, fussed over her constantly, and worried about every little thing. It was both endearing and occasionally frustrating. "I am pregnant, not broken," Beatrice reminded him when he tried to prevent her from lifting a basket of laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I can still do normal activities." "I know," Law said, but he took the basket from her anyway. "But you are my wife, carrying my child, and I am going to take care of you whether you like it or not." Beatrice could not really argue with that, especially when he looked at her with such love and concern. So she let him fuss, and took some satisfaction in the fact that he was as invested in this pregnancy as she was. Their son was born in late May of 1885, during a fierce thunderstorm that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. The labor was long and difficult, with only the doctor from town and Mrs. Richardson from the Double R Ranch to help. Law paced outside, forbidden from the room but terrified out of his mind by every cry he heard. When the baby's wail finally cut through the sound of the storm, Law nearly broke down the door getting back inside. He found Beatrice exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. "We have a son," she said softly, smiling up at him with tired joy. "A healthy, strong son." Law approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face of his child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was making little fussing noises as he squirmed in Beatrice's arms. Law felt something in his chest crack open, a love so fierce and immediate that it almost frightened him. "He is perfect," Law whispered, reaching out to touch one tiny hand with his finger. The baby's fingers curled around his and Law felt tears sting his eyes. "You are perfect, both of you." "What should we name him?" Beatrice asked. They had discussed names, of course, but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Law knew exactly what felt right. "Benjamin," he said. "After your father, if that is all right with you." Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. "Benjamin Lawrence Edwards, after both our fathers." Law's father had been named Lawrence, and while they had not been close when Law left Missouri, he still wanted to honor the man who had taught him so much. "It is perfect," Beatrice agreed, looking down at their son. "Hello, Benjamin. Welcome to the world, little one." Baby Benjamin proved to be a healthy, happy child who rarely fussed and seemed to enjoy being carted around the ranch in a sling on his mother's back. Law proved to be a devoted father, often found talking to the baby about ranching and horses while the infant stared up at him with solemn eyes. "He is going to grow up strong and smart," Law declared, holding Benjamin up to show him the horses in the corral. The baby was 6 months old and had just started sitting up on his own, just like his mother. "And hard-working and kind like his father," Beatrice added, coming up beside them and leaning against Law's free arm. "We make a good team," Law said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "All three of us." The years rolled on, bringing both joys and challenges. The ranch continued to prosper slowly but surely. They added to their house, building on 2 more rooms to give Benjamin his own space and create a proper spare room. They hired their first ranch hand when Benjamin was 3, a young man fresh from Texas who needed work and was willing to learn. When Benjamin was 4, Beatrice announced that she was pregnant again. This time, Law was better prepared for the worry and excitement, though no less devoted in his care of her. Their second child, a daughter they named Margaret Rose, was born in the winter of 1889. She had Beatrice's blonde hair and Law's amber eyes, and she was spoiled from the moment of her birth by both her parents and her older brother. "I have a sister," Benjamin announced to anyone who would listen, his small chest puffed with pride. "And I am going to protect her always." "That is right, son," Law said, ruffling the boy's hair. "That is what big brothers do." By 1892, the ranch was thriving. They had over 100 head of cattle, a successful horse breeding program that attracted buyers from as far away as New Mexico and California, and 3 ranch hands who worked full-time. The house had been expanded again, the barn rebuilt, and they had added several new corrals and a proper stable. Law stood on the porch one evening, watching Benjamin, now 7, teaching 5-year-old Margaret to ride on her new pony. The sun was setting in spectacular fashion, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold and pink. Behind him, he could hear Beatrice humming in the kitchen as she prepared supper. It had been 10 years since that day he had helped a struggling young woman pick up her spilled basket in the streets of Quartz Hill. 10 years since he had made the impulsive decision to walk her home. 10 years since he had seen her face and felt something shift in his heart. He had been drifting then, moving from place to place with no real purpose or direction. He had thought that was what he wanted, that freedom and independence. But it had taken meeting Beatrice to realize what he had really been looking for all along: a home, not just a place but a person, a family, a reason to stay. "What are you thinking about?" Beatrice asked, coming to stand beside him. She slipped her hand into his, their fingers interlacing automatically after years of practice. "About how lucky I am," Law said honestly. "About how different my life could have been if I had been anywhere else that day in town, or if I had not stopped to help." "I think about that sometimes too," Beatrice admitted. "About how close I came to never meeting you. It seems impossible now, not having you in my life." "You would have managed," Law said. "You are the strongest person I know." "Maybe," Beatrice allowed, "but I am glad I did not have to. Everything is better with you beside me." Law turned to fully face her, taking both her hands in his. After 10 years of marriage, she was even more beautiful to him than she had been the day they met. There were lines at the corners of her eyes now from smiling and squinting in the sun, and her hands were calloused from work, but to him she was perfect. "I love you," he said, because after 10 years it still needed to be said. I love you more than I did yesterday, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." "I love you too," Beatrice whispered, rising on her toes to kiss him. "My cowboy who stopped to help a clumsy woman with a spilled basket. Best decision I ever made," Law said against her lips. That night, after the children were in bed and the ranch was settled for the evening, Law and Beatrice lay together in their room, talking quietly about their plans for the future. They wanted to expand the horse operation, maybe hire another hand or two. Benjamin was getting old enough to start taking on real responsibilities around the ranch, and they needed to think about his education. "We have built something good here," Beatrice said, her head resting on Law's chest. "Something solid and real. I wish my parents could see it." "I think they can," Law said softly, "and I think they are proud of you, of both of us." "Do you ever regret it?" Beatrice asked. "Giving up your drifting days, settling down here?" "Not for a single second," Law said without hesitation. "This is everything I never knew I wanted. You, the kids, this ranch, all of it. I was not really living before I met you, Beatrice. I was just existing. You made me want to build something permanent, something that would last." "We built it together," Beatrice corrected. "Together," Law agreed. "And we will keep building it together for the rest of our lives." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Benjamin grew tall and strong, with his father's work ethic and his mother's determination. He learned ranching from the ground up, working alongside Law and the hired hands, developing a particular talent for training horses. Margaret, sweet and bright, preferred helping her mother with the household and garden, but she could ride as well as any cowboy when she wanted to. When Benjamin was 15 and Margaret 13, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again, much to everyone's surprise. She was 41 years old, and she had thought her childbearing years were behind her. "Another baby," Law said wonderingly, his hand spread across her belly. "After all this time, are you happy?" Beatrice asked. At 43, Law was not exactly young to be starting over with a newborn, and she worried about the timing. "Are you joking?" Law pulled her close. "Every child we have is a blessing. Yes, I am happy, surprised but happy." Their third child, a boy they named Samuel, was born in the autumn of 1897. He was smaller than his siblings had been, but healthy and vigorous, with a loud cry that kept the entire household up at night. Benjamin and Margaret were fascinated by their baby brother, taking turns helping care for him. "I feel like we are starting all over again," Beatrice said one night, exhausted from being up with the baby. But she was smiling as she said it, looking down at the tiny face of their son with such love that Law's heart clenched. "I do not mind starting over," Law said. "Not with you." As the new century approached, the Edwards family ranch was one of the most successful operations in the area. They had built a reputation for quality horses and honest dealing, and buyers came from all over the territory to do business with them. Benjamin, at 18, was as capable as any man twice his age, and there was talk of him taking over the day-to-day operations in a few years so Law and Beatrice could slow down a bit. On a warm spring evening in 1899, the whole family gathered on the expanded porch for supper. Benjamin was there with his new sweetheart, the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Margaret was chatting about the teaching position she hoped to get at the Quartz Hill School. Samuel, now a rambunctious toddler, was making a mess with his food while everyone laughed at his antics. Law looked around at his family, at the ranch spread out before them green and prosperous, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. How had he gotten so lucky? How had a drifting cowboy with no prospects and no plan ended up here, with a wife he adored, 3 healthy children, and a thriving business? It all came back to that moment in the street, to a spilled basket and a simple decision to help. That one small act of kindness had changed the trajectory of his entire life. Beatrice caught his eye across the table and smiled, and Law knew she was thinking the same thing. They had built this life together, brick by brick, day by day, through hard work and determination and love. So much love. "What are you two grinning about?" Margaret asked, noticing the look her parents were sharing. "Just happy," Beatrice said simply. "Just grateful for all of this." "Mother is getting sentimental in her old age," Benjamin teased, but his tone was affectionate. "I am not old," Beatrice protested, throwing a roll at her eldest son. He caught it and took a bite, laughing. "Neither of you are old," Margaret said loyally. "You are just experienced." "Diplomatic," Law said approvingly. "That will serve you well as a teacher." The evening wore on, full of laughter and good food and the easy comfort of family. Later, after the children had gone to bed and the ranch hands had retired to the bunkhouse, Law and Beatrice sat together on the porch swing Law had built a few years back. "Do you remember the first time you sat here?" Law asked, his arm around Beatrice's shoulders as they swayed gently back and forth. "This swing was not here then," Beatrice pointed out, "but I remember the first time you sat on this porch. You had worked all day fixing the fence, and you looked so tired, but you would not leave until you had finished. I knew then that you were someone special." "I knew the day I met you," Law said. "The way you cared more about that medicine for your father than anything else in that basket, even though you were almost in tears. The way you held yourself together even when everything was falling apart. I looked at you and I thought, that is a woman worth knowing." "And now you are stuck with me," Beatrice said, but she was smiling. "Best kind of stuck there is," Law assured her. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I would do it all again, you know. Every hard day, every struggle, every moment of doubt. I would do it all exactly the same because it led me here to this life with you." "Me too," Beatrice whispered. "No regrets, Law, not a single one." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one in the darkening sky. The sounds of the ranch settling for the night surrounded them. Horses moving in the corral, the distant call of a coyote, the breeze rustling through the cottonwood trees they had planted years ago. As the years rolled into the new century, the Edwards family continued to thrive. Benjamin married his sweetheart in 1902 and brought her to live at the ranch, where she fit in seamlessly with the family. They had their first child, a daughter, in 1903, making Law and Beatrice grandparents for the first time. "I am too young to be a grandfather," Law protested, but his face softened with wonder as he held his tiny granddaughter for the first time. "You are 49, Beatrice reminded him. "That is a perfectly reasonable age to be a grandfather." "You are taking this better than I am," Law observed, watching as Beatrice cooed at the baby with complete ease. "I am a woman," Beatrice said practically. "We are built to handle these transitions better. You will adjust." She was right, of course. Within weeks, Law was completely besotted with his granddaughter, often found holding her while he did ranch paperwork, or showing her the horses even though she was far too young to understand. Margaret married in 1904, a kind young man who worked at the bank in Quartz Hill. They settled in town, but she visited the ranch frequently, and Law and Beatrice were happy to see her thriving in her role as a teacher and wife. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved nothing more than following his father and older brother around the ranch. At 7 years old, he was already showing signs of being a natural horseman, and Law spent hours with him, teaching him everything he had learned over the decades. In 1906, on a beautiful spring day much like the one when they had first met, Law and Beatrice celebrated their 23rd wedding anniversary. They had a quiet dinner, just the two of them, while Benjamin and his wife watched Samuel and handled the evening chores. "23 years," Beatrice marveled, looking at her husband across the candlelit table. He was older now, his dark hair streaked with gray, lines etched deep around his eyes and mouth. But to her, he was as handsome as he had been the day they met. "It has gone by so fast." "And so slow," Law said. "I remember days when we were struggling so hard that time seemed to stand still, but looking back, it feels like it all happened in the blink of an eye." "We have had a good life," Beatrice said. "Better than I ever imagined possible that day you helped me in the street." "I almost did not stop, you know," Law admitted. "I was supposed to meet some of the other hands from the Double R at the saloon. I was running late. But then I saw you and something told me to help. Best impulse I ever followed." "I would have managed," Beatrice said. "But I am so grateful I did not have to. You changed everything, Law. You saved me in more ways than just picking up a spilled basket." "We saved each other," Law corrected. "I was lost before I met you, drifting without purpose, without hope for anything more than the next job, the next town. You gave me a reason to stay, to build, to dream. You gave me a home." They finished their dinner and walked outside, hand in hand, to look at the ranch they had built together. It sprawled before them in the evening light, prosperous and peaceful. The house had been expanded multiple times over the years. The barn and outbuildings were well maintained. The corrals were full of quality horses, and the pastures beyond held healthy cattle. But more than the physical structures, they had built a family. Benjamin and his wife and children lived in the new house they had built on the eastern edge of the property. Margaret visited every week with her husband. Samuel was growing strong and healthy. They had created something that would last beyond their lifetimes, a legacy that would continue through their children and their children's children. "We did good," Law said softly, his arm around Beatrice's waist. "We did," she agreed, leaning into him. "We did very good indeed." As the sun set on another day, they stood together. These two people who had found each other through chance and built a life through love. The cowboy who had stopped to help, and the woman with the spilled basket, now bound together through decades of shared work and joy and sorrow and triumph. Their story had started with a simple act of kindness on a dusty street in Quartz Hill. It had grown into a love story for the ages, the kind of partnership that only comes along once in a lifetime. And as they stood there, watching the stars come out over their land, surrounded by the life they had created, they knew that they had been blessed beyond measure. The years continued to pass, bringing the natural changes that time brings. Law and Beatrice gradually handed over more of the ranch operations to Benjamin, though Law still worked every day because he could not imagine a life without purpose. Beatrice spent more time with her grandchildren, of which there were eventually 5, teaching them to read and bake and appreciate the beauty of the world around them. Samuel grew into a fine young man, eventually marrying and starting his own family on a piece of land his parents gave him on the western edge of the ranch. The Edwards family ranch became known throughout Arizona, now a state rather than a territory, as one of the finest horse breeding operations in the region. In 1920, Law and Beatrice celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even their first great-grandchild. Law was 66 years old now, his hair completely gray, his face deeply lined from decades of working in the sun. But his amber eyes were still bright with intelligence and love, and he still stood tall and strong. Beatrice, at 62, had softened with age, her blonde hair now silver, her hands showing the wear of years of work. But she was still beautiful, still the woman Law had fallen in love with decades ago, just with added layers of wisdom and experience. "How does it feel?" Margaret asked her mother as they watched Law playing with the great-grandchild, a little girl named Sarah. 35 years of marriage. It feels like a gift, Beatrice said simply. Every day with him has been a gift. Even the hard days, even the times when we struggled, we had each other, and that made everything bearable. You two are an inspiration, Margaret said. The way you still look at each other, the way you still reach for each other's hands, that is what I want for my marriage, what I want for all of us. The secret, Beatrice said, watching as Law made the little girl laugh with his silly faces, is that we never stop choosing each other. Every day, through every challenge, we chose to stay, to work through things, to love each other even when it was difficult. Love is not just a feeling. It is a decision you make over and over again. And he makes it easy to choose him, Margaret observed. He does, Beatrice agreed with a smile. He really does. As the party continued around them, with children running and laughing, with food and music and celebration, Law caught Beatrice's eye across the yard. Even after all these years, that look still made her heart flutter. He excused himself from the group he was with and made his way to her side, taking her hand in his. "Dance with me," he asked, even though there was no music playing at that moment. "Always," Beatrice said, letting him pull her into his arms. They swayed together under the Arizona sky, surrounded by the family and life they had created, in the place they had built with their own hands and hearts. And as they moved together in perfect synchronicity, born of decades of partnership, they both knew that they had been given something precious and rare. Their love story had started with a spilled basket on a dusty street, a chance encounter that had changed everything. It had grown into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of kindness, determination, and love. They had faced hardships and triumphs, struggles and joys, always together, always united. And as the sun set on their 35th anniversary, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and red and orange, Law and Beatrice Edwards knew that they had lived a life worth living. They had loved deeply, worked hard, raised good children, and built something that would endure long after they were gone. It was more than enough. It was everything. The evening grew late, and eventually the guests began to depart. Children carried sleepily to wagons and automobiles, a new invention that still seemed strange and wondrous. Benjamin and his wife stayed to help clean up, and Samuel and his family remained as well, all of them moving with the easy familiarity of people who had worked together for years. When the house was finally quiet and everyone had either left or retired to their rooms, Law and Beatrice found themselves alone on the porch once again, sitting in their swing, watching the stars. "You ever think about that day?" Beatrice asked. "The day we met, all the time," Law admitted. "I think about how easily it could have gone differently. What if I had walked down a different street? What if I had been 5 minutes earlier or later? What if I had ignored you and kept walking?" "But you did not," Beatrice said softly. "You stopped and you helped and you changed my life." "You changed mine too," Law said. "I was so empty before you, Beatrice. I did not even realize how empty until I met you and suddenly had something to fill the void." "We filled it together," Beatrice said, the same correction she had made countless times over the years, because it was true. Their life had been built by both of them, equal partners in everything. "Together," Law agreed, pulling her close. "Always together." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only comes from decades of companionship. They did not need words to communicate anymore, could read each other's thoughts and feelings in a glance or a touch. It was a deep intimacy, hard-won through years of commitment and love. "I am proud of us," Beatrice said eventually. "Of what we built, who we became. When I was 22 and struggling to keep the ranch going and care for my father, I never imagined I could have a life like this. A partner like you, children, grandchildren, a thriving ranch. It seemed impossible. "Nothing is impossible when you have the right person beside you," Law said. "You taught me that. You taught me that with determination and love, anything can be overcome." "You taught me that I did not have to do everything alone," Beatrice countered. "That it was okay to accept help, to lean on someone else. That was a hard lesson for me." "You were strong," Law said. "You are still strong. But strength is not about doing everything yourself. It is about knowing when to ask for help and being brave enough to accept it." More years passed, bringing with them the inevitable changes that time requires. Law and Beatrice moved more slowly, their bodies showing the wear of 8 decades of life and hard work. But their minds remained sharp, and their love for each other remained as strong as ever. In 1925, on a crisp autumn morning, Law woke to find Beatrice still sleeping beside him. This was unusual, as she was typically the first one up, even in their advanced years. He watched her for a moment, her face peaceful in sleep, and felt a wave of tenderness so powerful it almost hurt. They had been married for 40 years. 40 years of waking up beside each other, of working together, of building a life. He knew every line on her face, every silver strand of her hair, every gesture and expression. She was as much a part of him as his own heartbeat. "Good morning," Beatrice murmured, her eyes opening slowly. "You are watching me sleep." "I am appreciating my wife," Law corrected. "There is a difference." Beatrice smiled and reached for his hand, their fingers interlacing automatically. 40 years today," she said. "Can you believe it?" "It seems like yesterday and a lifetime ago all at once," Law said. "Some days I still feel like that young cowboy who was so nervous asking your father for permission to court you. Other days, I feel every one of my 71 years. "You are still the same man who stopped to help me in the street," Beatrice said firmly. "Still kind, still strong, still the best partner I could have asked for." They had a quiet celebration that evening, surrounded by their family, which had grown considerably over the years. 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren, all of them products of the love Law and Beatrice had shared. The ranch continued to prosper under Benjamin's management, and the Edwards name was respected throughout the state. As the party wound down and they found themselves alone again, Law and Beatrice walked slowly around the property, his arm supporting her as they moved. They visited Benjamin's grave on the hill, and Beatrice laid flowers on the marker. "He would be so proud," she said softly, looking out over the ranch, "of all of this, of us, of what we built." "He is proud," Law said with certainty. "Wherever he is looking down and smiling." They made their way back to the house as the sun set, painting the sky in the brilliant colors they had watched together thousands of times over the decades. Inside, the house was quiet, all the family having returned to their own homes for the evening. Law helped Beatrice into bed, a nightly ritual they had developed as they aged. He tucked the quilts around her, then climbed in beside her, pulling her close in the way they had slept for 40 years. "I love you," Beatrice whispered into the darkness. "I have loved you from the beginning, and I will love you beyond the end." "I love you too," Law said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are my everything, Beatrice, my whole world." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, 2 souls so intertwined that it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. And if they dreamed of a sunny day in Quartz Hill, of a spilled basket and a kind stranger, of the moment their lives had changed forever. The years continued, as years do, and eventually Law and Beatrice both passed into the next life, surrounded by their children and grandchildren, their hands clasped together as they had been for over 4 decades. They were buried side by side on the hill, near Benjamin and his wife, overlooking the ranch they had saved and grown and loved. Their story became family legend, passed down through generations. The tale of how a cowboy had stopped to help a struggling young woman with a spilled basket, and how that simple act of kindness had blossomed into a love that lasted a lifetime. It was told at family gatherings, used as an example of what true partnership looked like, held up as proof that good things come to those who are willing to help others. The ranch remained in the Edwards family, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own touches while maintaining the core values Law and Beatrice had instilled: hard work, honesty, kindness, and family. Those were the principles they had lived by, and those were the principles that continued to guide their descendants. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun was setting over the Arizona hills, if you listened very carefully, you could almost hear the creak of a porch swing and the soft murmur of voices. Two people so in love that not even death could truly separate them. The cowboy and the woman with the spilled basket, together for all eternity, their love story complete and perfect and everlasting. Their legacy lived on in every child born to the Edwards family, in every act of kindness shown to a stranger, in every hard day of work done with pride and purpose. Law and Beatrice had taught their family what it meant to love deeply, to work hard, to help those in need, and to build something that would last. And it all started with a basket spilling in the street, with a cowboy who chose to stop and help, with two people who found each other at exactly the right moment and built a lifetime of love from that one chance encounter. It was a simple beginning to an extraordinary story, proof that the smallest acts of kindness can change everything, and that true love, once found, can weather any storm and last through all the years. The Edwards family ranch still stands today, over a century later, a testament to the love and dedication of the couple who saved it. And on the hill where they are buried, wildflowers grow every spring, as if the land itself remembers the love story that unfolded there, and celebrates it in the only way it knows how.